Today we have a very special guest. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, I'm Xenia. I'm a wrestling journalist, presenter, blogger, and interviewer, which you might have
How
seen
are
on
you
the
doing today?
internets before.
Right.
I'm doing great. How are you?
Oh, doing good. Enjoying the weather we're having here. So can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Uh, so I've been doing wrestling things in the media sphere for about 4.5 years now. Um, I mostly do, when I say presenter, it's an umbrella term. I do ring announcing, I do commentary, I do analytics, but I also have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/Xenia did that, where I mostly do interviews, other stuff too, like unboxings, analytics, think pieces, video essays, as I call them. Um, I guess I'm mostly known for my interviews. I say I do turnkey interviews because the entire idea is to give you a wrestling interview with maybe the same wrestlers that you've seen a lot of times with questions that you've never heard them asked. I try to take a very individual approach, and sometimes it stirs away from wrestling a lot of the times, depending on who I'm talking to. I've definitely talked to wrestlers about food, about their past professions, about their military experience, about rescuing animals and other things.
Yeah, I was watching a couple of your videos earlier, and they're very good, very good.
Thank you.
Definitely. So, how did you come to do what you do?
Honestly, to me, it was a decision that I probably should have made earlier because I do actually have formal education in journalism. I have a bachelor's degree in PR and journalism, and I also have a master's degree. And it is actually my profession. It's something I'm supposed to do. And I've also been a wrestling lover for a very long time. Yes, I was talking to someone yesterday, and they said 13 years, but then I was like, well, no, wait, it's since I was 11, so it's almost 15 years now. So at one point, I just sat down and put the two together, and that's how I decided to start doing this.
Well, it's very good content. I've been trying to pick through it and try to watch as much as I can before the interview today, and all the content it just looks professionally done. So, that's definitely a plus, and the type of content that you have is pretty wide range, something for everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Definitely. I try to, you know, also venture out into things beyond wrestling because I also do cooking videos. I have a whole cooking series on my channel. I also do lifestyle videos. I do vlogs. I'm also into fashion, and that's more so represented on my Instagram, which, by the way, the same username everywhere. Xenia did that. So I definitely like to think that my profile is a good melting pot of different things for different people.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. And it's very well put together, and I'll have the link down in the description below for anybody who wants to check them out for sure. So as far as some of the things that you've done, as far as like interviews and some of the blogs you've done, do you have a favorite interview?
That's a question that I get pretty often, and it's so hard to answer because I've had so many interviews that I really love, and I just want to put it out there that every single wrestler I've ever interviewed has been a breeze to work with. They've been amazing. But I am probably a little biased. I definitely would pick the Dolph Ziggler interview as one of my favorites, solely because, first of all, he's super professional. He's amazing to work with. He makes it easy for you. Like, he makes it easy and smooth for everyone involved on set. And I've also definitely been a fan of his for a good while. And we've known each other on the internet for a bit, but before that interview, we had never actually met, and it was our first time meeting in real life. So it was really special. And it was before his comedy show in, I think, in Las Vegas. Yeah, in Las Vegas. And I also admire that side of him because I am very into stand-up comedy too, even regardless of wrestling. And I think his sets are great too. So we mostly talked about comedy in that interview. We barely talked about wrestling. So that was also another way to branch out from what he usually talks about in interviews. So I think that one is a really good one.
Yeah, I saw that one. I haven't seen that yet, but I'm definitely planning on watching it here in a little bit for sure. Um, so as far as things that you do, is there a certain way that you do your research, or do you just go and kind of watch some of the content, or read up on the subject that you're interviewing, or person, or whatever you're vlogging about?
I definitely do the basic research, of course, as everyone else would do. I watch their other interviews or read their other interviews. I Google them, like I read up on their career if I know I have some blank spots to fill. But also, the way I do it is usually when I'm inquiring for an interview, I already have an idea of what I want to talk about to that particular person because uh, I don't really like, I try to do as many interviews as I physically can, but the way I choose who to inquire for is not necessarily based on like, oh, I think this person's cool and this one is not. Like some wrestlers have told me like, oh, well, like why did it take you so long to ask me for an interview? It's not because you're not cool, you're cool. It's because I have to have a specific idea of what I want to bring up. And I feel like I personally, as a creator, have to have a very clear idea of what that wrestler stands for to make that interview the most interesting that I can. When it comes to vlogs, it's usually a little easier. It's usually promotions that I'm already familiar with. Or on the other hand, it's like, oh, it's my first time going to a show of that promotion. And then I'll just go blindly. I'll just go and have a genuine first impression. But a lot of the times it's a promotion that I already know and that I possibly already work with. So it's more of an at home type of feeling.
Yeah, and when you're doing your interviews, I find that it's a lot of stuff that I haven't seen in other interviews, and the way that it's laid out is definitely very different.
Thank you. I try to make it a product in a way because I do have a lot of friends who do amazing interviews, but their approach is a little different to where they keep it as raw as possible, which is great. I think it's a great thing, but I'm just not, as a person, as a human, I'm just not like that. My interviews take a long time to produce, which might be a drawback to some people, but I always warn talent. I tell them that like it's going to take at least 4 weeks for me to put that out because I like to try and keep the viewer entertained. I like to add a lot of B-roll of their matches. I like to again do research and do a little file on the guest before the interview starts because I want it to be enjoyable even if it's your first time ever seeing that wrestler. Like I want you to find that wrestler compelling as I find them, even if it's your first time seeing
So,
them ever.
as far as some of the interviewing and announcing that you've done, um, or commentary, excuse me, what promotions have you worked for or worked with?
So I've done commentary in two languages actually, in Russian and in English. So I did English commentary for my promotion back at home, IWF Russia, Independent Wrestling Federation. They're branching out to international audiences, so I did English commentary for them. And then later on, I did Russian commentary of AEW Dark. Like it wasn't official, like it's not on their YouTube, but for Russian fans. I did commentary of AW Dark in Russian, and I did it for maybe about a year, like from the point that they started producing Dark. Then I had to quit just because I was moving and I didn't really have the time to do it. But I'm very open now, where I am in life, to do commentary again, because it was a really great experience, and I have a bit of experience. I have like maybe 3-ish years of commentary experience, so I feel like I've honed my craft, and I bring a new approach
Definitely.
to the
And
table.
when it comes down to some of the commentary or announcing you've done, how do you go about that? Because I would imagine, to a degree, if it's the first time you're meeting that wrestler, it could be a little nerve-wracking. But how do you go about trying to, I guess, stay in the character, so to speak?
It is also a different level of nerve-wracking based on like how live it is, because I've done all three. It depending on whether you're at home or in a studio doing it over recording the show you have, or it's a live stream, or it's an actual live event that you're commentating live. Of course, it's a different level of nerve-wracking for sure. But even when I did studio commentary, I always did it like I tried to do it in one take. I tried to minimize, you know, the moving parts, because I feel like that's the way wrestling commentary should be. Like it's raw in a way, and it's a real time kind of thing. And definitely, again, it takes research. It takes research on every wrestler that's going to be on the card. And if it's a live event, you also ask a wrestler what they finish in maneuver is called, what they like, what's their moniker, what do they want mentioned about them. It's like a lot of things in wrestling and like a lot of things in media, it's largely about communication. And once you develop a routine for yourself, it
Yeah,
stops
and
being scary.
I'm just kind of curious in the world of wrestling, as far as commentating and announcing goes. Did you have a person or persons that kind of inspired you to a degree, or take little bits of different ones to kind of imitate and bring to life in your own character?
Yeah, for sure. I feel like it's honestly a good thing to watch other people's work. Like, if you're a wrestler, you have to watch good wrestling to be a good wrestler. I feel like a lot of things that we do, even outside of wrestling, are by imitation to a certain degree. I definitely admire a lot of the current talent that we have in the scene. I've definitely taken, I've definitely tried to take after Excalibur to a certain point. Uh, to more Ronaldo, who's unfortunately not actively doing this anymore. I really like commentary that actually Alex Koslov does for New Japan Strong. And maybe because we have a similar cultural background, that's also helped me gain a certain confidence. I feel like it was more like about representation and about representation of uh, maybe more so the way that I naturally talk, because you do hear accents in wrestling announcing quite a lot. And this is the industry where it's not something to be ashamed of. And it really helped my confidence, and it really helped my structure and helped me work around that. So yeah, definitely it's a good thing to do if we get into this field of work, to listen to people. And like to me, even before I started doing commentary, I've always felt like commentary was such a huge part of a wrestling broadcast. It brings a lot to the product. Also, a good friend of mine, Jordan Castle, who's also an announcer commentator, MLJ, the voice of JCW, the heart, the soul of JCW. And we've also seen a lot of, like, talking about ML, we've seen a lot of people who don't fit that traditional box of a super official, super serious announcer, say Jay Rose too. And lately, this past 5-10 years, we've seen a lot more character when it comes to wrestling announcing, and that really speaks to me. And I feel like that's the type of announcer that I am, and I think that's great, because like, why be bland when you can
Very
be
true, and I
interesting?
think that you're right when it comes to commentary in wrestling, it when you're at home watching it, it kind of builds it and makes it more exciting, depending on who it is, whether it be going back to the Attitude Era and listening to Jim Ross and Jerry the King Lawler, or, like current stuff, like one of my favorite announcers that's still out there is like Justin Roberts. I just like the way he presents it. It makes it more, I guess, sound a little more prestigious, so to speak, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Announcing based of how it's done can definitely set the mood for a show. Like, it can definitely add to like a big match feel for sure. And I feel like that's definitely the vibe that Justin Roberts gives
Yeah,
off.
and
So I totally get what you're saying.
just out of curiosity, when it comes down to like the indie scene, since AEW's been out, it seems like there's been a big boom, so to speak. And I like what they're doing as far as with AEW Dark bringing not so much unknown talent, but talent that people who are watching that haven't seen before may not have seen before.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, and I'm an avid watcher of AW Dark. I have a special connection, I guess, again because I used to do commentary, and I think I've seen AW Dark live more than I've like watched it on the internet because I spent quite some time in Florida last year, this year, and I did go to the tapings a lot. The tapings in Orlando, at Universal Studios, and then the tapings that they did in Jacksonville, and a lot of those things. And it's definitely always a nice surprise. And again, as a wrestling journalist and as a blogger, someone who, again, just to like put it out there, I'm not a news journalist. I'm not a scoops type of person. I'm not gonna like torture anyone for insider information. That's not what I do. However, when I go to shows, I actually like to post updates on social media. And for me, it's like Dark is just like always exciting. There's always gonna be someone that people are going to be so excited to see. Like, say, when Martina appeared, the session was, I was freaking out. When Jake Something appeared for the first time, when Blake Christian appeared for the first time and got a huge reaction, chants and everything. Like, of course, a lot of the times it would be someone that even the live audience is maybe not very familiar with, but it's a great way for them to showcase themselves and for them to get a new local audience as well, because a lot of the times the live audience would be seeing local wrestlers from the place that the show is actually taking place, so they can continue supporting that wrestler and they can continue going to shows, which is also great. But for me, it's always a special moment when I get to see someone that I didn't maybe expect to see. And especially cool, again, if I'm like friends with that person, they're of course not allowed to tell you before they appear there. And
Definitely. So
you just see them walk
something else
out, and
I'm
it's always
curious
such a
about,
special moment.
you being in that inner circle of wrestling, what kind of impact do you think AEW has made coming out several years ago, and do you see them getting bigger? And just because their product, even though it's still wrestling, it is so much different than WWE, for example.
It is very different, and I'm probably going to sound like the biggest dork, but I'm definitely going to say that I think Tony Khan changed the face of wrestling. I think Tony Khan changed the world of wrestling, and that's exactly what he set out to do. And it's only going to get bigger, and it's only going to get greater. And I do feel like the secret sauce is that Tony Khan is actually a fan. Like, Tony Khan loves wrestling genuinely with his heart. And even though he's also a businessman and he, of course, knows his ways and he, of course, is handling everything greatly. Like, I feel like the way that they've handled every crisis that they've had, every setback that they've had has been very graceful. But it's, at heart, he's a fan, and he's doing things that are not just good for business, but also good for wrestling. And when AEW first came along, I made a video. I have a video on my channel, and I think the video is actually called "AEW is gonna make the world of wrestling a better place" or something along those lines. I made that video during the first months of AEW's operation, right before they had the first show, Double or Nothing, in Las Vegas before the pandemic. And I separated into bullet points, and I pretty much talked about why I think AEW is going to change the face of the industry. And not to brag, but pretty much all of those things kind of happened. So I had it covered. And honestly, I think it's been amazing to watch AEW grow. And again, it's only been getting greater. And I can't wait for them to figure out ROH. I can't wait for ROH to maybe get a TV deal, and for them to be able to branch out that roster that they have, because it's a huge roster for just 3 hours of TV content a week. So I feel like they're growing organically, and it's almost like it feels right whenever they introduce a new show or introduce a new YouTube program. It feels organic and it feels right. It doesn't feel overinflated.
Yeah, and I remember when they started announcing
holds for
things
AEW.
and bringing people in like the Young Bucks and Jericho, and where they're at now, seeing some of the ex WWE talent, like Paul White, or people like Andrade and the Hardy Boys, and it's just like, I don't understand why, if you read online, you see that people are I don't know if they're upset over the fact that that's going on, but I like that aspect, because you take some of those wrestlers that WWE says, well, you're past your prime, and then they still got it. They're still going out there and performing at the level that they did 10 years ago.
Yeah, I feel like this approach and those things that people say, like, oh, they only hire ex-WWE guys. First of all, that's not true. That's not the truth, because we do see a lot of amazing homegrown talent. And, well, when I say homegrown, I mean that they got most of their popularity while they were in AEW. Of course, no one just becomes a wrestler out of thin air. Of course, they had lives before that. But when I say homegrown, I mean that most of their exposure they got from AEW. We had a great tag team championship run from Jurassic Express. We have Jade Cargill, who has just astounding star quality, just sensational. She just broke the undefeated streak of freaking Goldberg when he was starting. This is insane. We have / had MJF, who I think is going to be one of the greatest. When we look back 20 years later, he's going to be one of the heels of our generation. We had a great run invention / resurrection of Scorpio Sky, of Christopher Daniels. We've seen amazing things from them. But also, on the other hand, when people talk about them hiring ex-WWE guys, I feel like it's also a very superficial thing to say, because in the end of the day, those ex-WWE guys are also ex-TNA guys, or ex whatever else guys, or ex-New Japan guys. They also had careers before WWE, and before WWE took the new approach of signing younger stars like they are now, and they were signing big stars. They were signing famous wrestlers. When they signed Adam Cole, he was big in ROH. When they signed AJ Styles, people knew him from New Japan, from Impact, from wherever. They're not just ex-WWE guys, and that's all there's to it, and that's their entire gist. That's not how any of that works. And in an industry like that, where WWE has been the leader for decades, of course they've definitely employed or touched or grazed the most of the great talent of that generation. There's no way they just didn't lay hands on those wrestlers at a certain point, of course, because they're good wrestlers. So I feel like that's just
Yeah,
such
because I
an
mean, if you go
empty
back to the Attitude Era,
complaint to have.
that's what
Like, I
they
don't
did
even know
then.
what those
I
people
mean,
are
it was
about.
between at that time, I think it was ECW, WCW, and at the time it was WWF, and they all did that. And I guess because it was just WWE for what 20 years, and then AEW comes along,
Yeah.
it's like, oh no, you shouldn't do that. But that's the way it's always been done.
Yeah, and I feel like that's, again, I feel like people complaining about wrestling on the internet forget that wrestling is just a show business in the same way that any other business is. Like, there's a field of work, then there's the workforce, then there's the stars in that workforce. Like, no one would say the same things about, say, football. Like, there's all the same famous players that maybe any club would like to have, and then the biggest one gets to have, and no one complains about it. Like, if you deliver pizza for Pizza Hut and then you get hired by Domino's, no one is going to be like, oh, all Domino's does is hire ex Pizza Hut guy. Like, that's just insane things to say. Like, people forget that wrestling, in the end of the day, to those people, to that talent, is a job. Like, that's the way
Exactly. I couldn't agree
the
more. I mean,
workforce
you're
moves
right. If
in
you
the
if you go
business.
from one
Like, it's
sports
just
team to
normal.
another, there's no big deal. But for whatever reason, wrestling has to be that difference maker. For whatever reason, people just have to find something to complain about. Even though you're right, it's straight entertainment. And if you don't like the product that you're complaining about, just don't watch it. Other people are liking it, so that's the reason they're doing what they're doing. So
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, if you don't like what you see, just watch something
No,
else.
sorry, go
Like,
ahead.
I do agree that, like, there are, sorry. I do agree that there are some things that should be complained about. Like, I do agree that when there's, when there's a pay gap, or when there's not enough representation of a certain, uh, gender or race or something like that, those things should be talked about. And when people complain about them, it's not just moving air. It's trying to bring the attention of those companies to the issue. And I feel like it's a healthy discussion to have. But if you're just like, I don't like it, cool, go watch something else. Like, because there's so much wrestling. I feel like we're in the prime of the industry in a way. Of course, people say that wrestling will never be as popular on TV and will not have the ratings that it had in the 90s and the 80s ever again. And that's probably true. But also because we're way past the generation of television. And we have freaking Fight TV, we have IWTV, we have so many platforms to watch wrestling on demand. We have freaking Peacock for WWE. That if you don't like this one, go watch another one. You don't like the other one, go watch another one. Like, there's so many things to fit any
Exactly.
single
Yeah, we're in
person
the
in the
world of
world
streaming services, and
preference. So maybe
I've
if you
heard
don't like it,
rumors
just go find
that
something that you like.
Tony Khan's trying to partner up with, I think it was HBO, to bring AEW out onto a streaming platform so everybody has access to it, not just watching clips on YouTube. So that would be pretty exciting to see. So I mean, he's grown that company exponentially, and you're right, it's been very organic. It's not been forced. Um, I just like, and on top of that, I like the old school feel where it's not all lights and tons of pyro and all that. It gives it kind of that late '90s, early '90s feel where you're in for a good event.
Yes. Like, I feel like in the end of the day, and it's again such a corny thing to say, but the thing that AEW kind of brought back into wrestling, and I don't mean just the AEW product, because when there's a large competitor, the leader is also forced to step up. But I feel like ultimately what AEW brought to the table is fun. Like when you come into the venue for an AEW show, you know you're gonna have fun. Of course, some episodes might be less exciting than the other ones, but you just know that you're gonna have a good time. And I feel like a big strong suit of AEW is the structure of their shows. And I think I keep saying that on like every podcast that I go to, but I just feel like it's so admirable the way that they structure their shows. It's a well-produced, well-structured show. It works with the psychology and with the retention of a viewer perfectly. Like the way that they structure the card, the way that you get this long match, then you get a shorter but exciting, quicker paced match, then you're back for a slower but maybe more technical match. Like you can tell that it's constructed by people who know wrestling, who know what wrestling is about, and who know how the viewer reacts and how the viewer is retained. And honestly, again, as a PR professional, for me, it's just
and within
delightful
regards
to
to
watch
like the indie
in that
scene,
regard as well, because I'm like,
I've
they
talked
know what
to a
they're doing.
few indie wrestlers myself, and it's just like listening to them talk about the promotions that they've worked for and the fact that if they do things for their character that's good for them, they can make a very, very good living just being on the independent scene and being able to do that where 15, 20 years ago the independent scene in certain areas wasn't as popular as it is. But I do think you're right that we're in that heyday, so to speak, of the big wrestling boom.
We definitely are. And it's great to see also because for the longest time in wrestling, as opposed to all other kinds of show business, the ultimate goal was always to get signed by WWE, now AEW, or at some point Impact when it was on a good run. And if you're, say, an actor or if you're a singer, you can not be famous, but also make a good living. Like you could sing in restaurants, you could sing at parties, you could record back vocals in studios, you could work in a karaoke bar. Like there's a way for you not to be in a public eye, but still make okay money with your profession within that show business. While in wrestling for the longest time, it's been that like either you have a shoot job and then you do shows every like weekend or every other weekend until you get noticed and until you get your big break, and you can't make wrestling your living before you get that big break and before you get the big signature on the big piece of paper. But recently it's definitely been changing, which is a great thing. And I definitely know of some indie wrestlers who don't want to get signed, who don't have an interest in getting signed with a large company because they're already making a better living than say like a mid-carder on NXT would, or like a low-carder in AEW would. They know that they have their stuff taken care of and they have creative control and they have control over their schedule, and they really don't crave that contract as much. Of course, there's still people who do, and of course it's still the ultimate goal for a lot of people, but as you said, we are in the midst of that shift. And again, it's exciting to see where it goes. And even now in the indies, in the like so-called super indies, I guess, like GCW again, or Impact, I guess, is like super indie at this point. We see wrestlers who can somewhat comfortably make a living from their consistent independent bookings. Like I definitely know GCW wrestlers whose job is GCW. Like even though GCW doesn't have contracts, with the one shining exception of Nick Gage, there's still people who are able to commit to this and to make wrestling their living, which I think is great because at the end of the day, all of us, all of the people who work in wrestling, we love this and we want this to be our living. And
Yeah,
it's a
exactly.
great thing that
Within
we're
regards
steering
to
away from a
indie
reality
wrestlers,
where the big boss and the big
one of the
company
bigger
is the only
ones,
way
and
to
I
do it.
think not so much that he is, better than anybody, but I think he had the right mindset to make a very good living was like Matt Cardona is one. He's comfortably doing. You know,
Hell yeah. Yeah, honestly, like, don't even get me started on Matt Cardona because I love Matt Cardona. I'm a huge fan. And honestly, in a way, and it's so funny to say, but in a way, he got me into GCW, which is like, ridiculous. Like, GCW fans would like boo me right now if I said that in front of them. But I did watch GCW before that, and I already liked it, but I wasn't watching consistently. And when he started feuding with Nick Gage, like before any match happened or anything, before they actually like came face to face, they had a bunch of vignettes where they like called each other out. And I used to be a fan, well, not like a super fan, but I used to admire Zack Ryder when I was younger in WWE. And then suddenly I see that he's now super jacked. He now flips the camera off, bleeds and cusses, and is about to have a death match. And I was just floored. I was like, this is the best thing ever. I was following that feud so closely. And that was before I started my American tour that I did over the span of the past 2 years. But even at that point, I was like, I have to see that match live. And I did. It was at Homecoming, GCW in Atlantic City Showboat last summer. I saw that match live, and to this day, I'm very biased, but I still think it's one of the best things I've seen live in a wrestling ring. Like, I wouldn't say it's one of the best matches. It's one of the best things I've seen in a wrestling ring. And everyone who's not backstage, who's not talking to him, everyone who was watching the feud from the outside expected him to take it easy and like expected him to, just dabble into deathmatch just a little bit because, makes sense. But he went all out. It was a bloodbath. The guy was bleeding so hard. And I also love how we got so many like snippets in the backstage part of it after the match happened, because Matt Cardona talked about it a lot on his own platforms, on his YouTube, on his podcast, and he really like broke it down. Apparently he had like a really bad cut on his shoulder, and like the ref almost made him stop the match, and then he decided to go all the way. Then I got some like backstage chatter that like he was really scared beforehand, because I asked my friend who was backstage, I was like, was he excited? And my friend goes like, he was scared. And like, honestly fair, like I would be scared too. There's freaking Nick Gage in the ring with light tubes. And the way that they incorporated the action figure thing, which is a ridiculous cool shtick, but like I love it so much because I'm also an action figure collector, and the way they incorporated it into the match. And of course, when he won, the reaction was insane. Like it was one of the craziest things I've ever been a part of. And of course I was rooting for him because again, I'm a fan. So, and I was actually in a good section for that. Like people weren't like tomato. Like there were people who were also rooting for him there, but it was insane. And I know how a lot of credible wrestling journalists after the thing were insinuating that it was planned, that it was like a plant with the bottles that everyone started throwing. And I know for sure that it was not. And also I vlogged that show, and one of the things that those people said was that like in favor of their theory that it's an elaborate plan, that the GCW staff apparently weren't trying to stop anyone, but in my vlog, in my video, you can clearly see them trying to stop people from throwing things, which I'm glad I contributed to the discourse. But yeah, it was insane. It's to this day one of my favorite shows I've ever been to live. So yeah, absolutely. I could not agree more with you. Matt Cardona is a shining, amazing example of a wrestler who's having a better run now on the indies than he did in WWE. Even though he did have some great moments in WWE, he had some great feuds. He had his WrestleMania moment, good for him. But
yeah, and
he said
when he got released,
that
I think
WWE was his developmental.
it wasn't so much an
so
eye
cool,
opener as
he's
it
so
was
right,
kind
it's
of
so
like
true.
1,000 pounds was lifted off his shoulders based on, just watching his YouTube channels and the things that they had planned with the podcast, the YouTube channel, and then of course him being as active as he is in the indie scene, and you know showing up in GCW for me was an absolute shock, because watching him all those years in WWE, you would never think that he would do something like that, which I think made it that much better.
Yes, definitely. And his YouTube stuff, he's also one of the pioneers of wrestling YouTube. Like, if it wasn't for True Long Island Story back in the day, I don't know if I would be on wrestling YouTube. Like, back in the day, no one was doing that. Like, he was one of the first people to ever have a fully wrestling themed, dedicated YouTube channel, to the point where WWE decided to buy it, and WWE owns the rights to True Long Island Story still, but they ran it into the ground, unfortunately. And funny enough, I actually talked about it in my interview with best friends, Chuck Taylor and Trent Beretta, because Trent was on the show. He was on True Long Island Story. He was signed to WWE back when they were filming it. And actually, Chuck also had one of the first ever wrestling channels on YouTube as well, where he was, even before True Long Island Story, where he was like posting videos of him scaring kids during his entrances and training with Ricochet. And to me, that was such a special moment too, because it's also one of my favorite interviews I've ever done, because they're my absolute favorite tag team ever. And again, also because of all the YouTube stuff, because it's so cool to sit down with people who were at the start of what I do right now, and the way that they shaped that aspect of the industry. And of course, Cardona to this day does the podcast, does the YouTube channel, and he's really good at it. I feel like it's very, very entertaining. And
Yeah,
I'd love to
and
eventually do something with him.
I
Film something
remember
with him.
seeing an interview
But
somewhere with him,
again, honestly, I don't know if I
and
would be here
he said that
if it wasn't for
at the
True Long
time
Island Story back in
before
the day.
he started doing the YouTube thing, he was not really getting noticed for the talent that he has, and he kind of said, "Okay, if you're not going to do anything with me, I'm going to force you to." And then, of course, we got the nice run out of that, and then to see where he's gone from that time to where he is now. I mean, it's night and day, and I couldn't be happier to just watch the content, because he's so talented, along with like Swoggle, Brian Myers.
He's incredibly talented. Yes. And also, he was definitely always one of the wrestlers who like took the matters into their own hands. Like you mentioned, he definitely, like, the purpose of Long Island Story was to get noticed and to actually get the audience that he deserves. And also, then I remember I can't remember which one, unfortunately, for one of the WrestleManias, they had this whole like campaign with Dolph Ziggler, because they're really good friends in real life, where they were supposed to wrestle each other, I guess, in their minds, not in the minds of WWE. And they were posting all these vignettes and like taunting each other on the internet. And they even made those like stickers that were like the yin yang sign, but with Ziggler's logo and Cardona's logo. And I think I still have one of those somewhere. And of course, it didn't end up, like, the match didn't end up happening at WrestleMania, of course. But I think Ziggler was in a tag match or in a battle royal or something like that, and he like wore the sticker on his entrance gear. Like, Cardona was definitely the person to draw attention to himself, to command attention that he deserved and that he still deserves. And I feel like that's like ties in perfectly with the way he got released, and he actually regained full control over his
Definitely.
career.
So
And he made
you mentioned
like,
earlier that
guy
you're an avid
knows what he's doing. Like, he
figure
knows
collector.
how wrestling works. He knows how to work a crowd.
How did you get into
And
that?
it's been delightful to watch him. figures.
Wow.
Oh, I guess the best answer would be gradually, and I didn't even notice until I one day looked around and there were 300 figures around me. Uh, so I used to be, and I still am, a huge Miz fan, and I really liked his tag run with Alex Riley at the time because I'm a sucker for for that trope, for like, oh, mentor and his protege that's inevitably gonna snap and whoop his ass like that. I love that trope. Uh, so at one point they did like a battle pack. The Mattel did the battle pack of them both, and that was the first ever, the two first wrestling figures I guess that I ever bought. And then I just never stopped. I don't know what happened, but I definitely have like a more mindful approach right now, because I used to just like buy things that I liked, that's still kind of what I do, but now I have more background information and I do like more research, and I haven't bought a WWE figure in a good while actually. I definitely buy AW figures now of wrestlers that I like, and when they announced the Best Friends one, I tweeted that I'm gonna buy 2 of each when they release, which I did. Because you have to let one breathe and then you have to keep the other in the box. It makes perfect sense. But also now I don't really buy figures as like mindlessly and as much as I used to. I definitely have a soft spot for like early 2000s Jacks specific, and they're hard to find MOC in boxes because back then when they were getting released, there wasn't really a culture around wrestling figures like there is now, and it's really hard to find them in good condition. Like if you go to a toy show, there's usually like a bin of the loose ones. So like dig in, my dear. But when it comes to like the actual boxes, it's so hard to find them. And actually, one of my absolute favorite figures is I call it the Ziggler before Ziggler, Nikki from Spirit Squad, the Jack specific one, and it's in the box and it's in a perfect condition. I'm infinitely proud of that. I also like all kinds of like indie figures. I like Figure Toy Company. I like the minifigures that WrestleCrate UK is a European wrestling subscription box, and I have a code with them. If you subscribe, use the code. Xenia did that for a free item. I've been working with them for several years now, and they have the line of minifigures called Heavy Crate Champions, and those are exceptional. Like the Car Noir figure is one of my absolute favorite ones. They recently did one with Botchamania, and it's an action figure of a Botchamania table that says "I am the table." Like I love all kinds of like quirky indie stuff like that. I own exactly one Mercado figure. Mercado figures are Mexican bootleg figures of luchadors. And I own a Mercado figure of Bandito, who's
when
probably
it
my
comes
favorite
down
luchador,
to
actually.
wrestling
So now I'm more
figures,
into like the niche,
the
special
for me
stuff.
too, I
I don't
think
just buy
the
WWE figures at Target
quirky
anymore.
item, the thing that you don't really see a lot of, it kind of catches my eye a little bit more than seeing something on the shelf at like Walmart or Target or anything like that. That's pretty well mass produced. That your neighbor may end up having it.
I mean, WWE figures happen to be rare and quirky sometimes too, because I definitely own the Easter Bunny WWE Mattel figure that we then found out was Jason Gabriel. Um, that came with Adam Rose figure. It was a battle pack, but I didn't display them separately because it's just like such a weird thing to see on a figure shelf. There's all the wrestlers and suddenly it's an Easter Bunny. Um, Also, Mattel recently did the like Hollywood Stars series, and I think there's 3 of them there. Definitely John Cena because I own that one. The Rock, and I think Roddy Piper. And the Roddy Piper one is like the elusive, weird, non-existent figure of the line. Like they're impossible to find. Those are Walmart exclusives. And like you go to Walmart, you go through all the shelves, you go through all the boxes. If you know your stuff, you know there's a box on the top of the shelf It's usually unpacked of like all the same figures, and it has the series on the side. You go through the box, there's nowhere to be found. I saw it once in real life at a toy show, and I have no interest in purchasing it. It's just that like I'm more amused by like what's happening with that figure. So I saw it at the toy show, and I asked the vendor, I was like, how did you get your hands on it? And he told me that some guy came in with 3 of those and sold them to 3 separate vendors. Like, they don't even know where those came from. Like, I don't know how that happened. So sometimes something like that would happen. A lot of the times it's also that a figure would be so hyped when it's coming out, and it's, again, usually some like Target exclusive or Walmart exclusive or GameStop exclusive. And people care about it so much that the moment it comes out, it just jumps in price. When the NXT Elite Target exclusive Pete Dunne was coming out, people were losing their shit. It was reappearing on eBay for 5 times the price the second someone found it.
Sure. Do you have a older?
I'm sorry, I had a cold recently, and like my voice just gives
older
out. I talk too much.
wrestling figures from say the 80s, the 90s of some legends of yesterday's wrestling?
Do you want to ask the question again? I definitely have some figures from the 90s. The 80s, not sure, but from the 90s, I definitely have some Jack specific ones. So I actually found a Hurricane Helms figure. It's a secondhand store in New York. So that was quite a find. It's not in a perfect condition, because whenever you find figures and at a like non-collector place, it's bound to be a little rough around the edges, but it's kind of cool. I also have a Jack specific of William Regal that I found at a toy show in LA. That's also kind of cool. I recently acquired a Bone Cruncher, finally. Those are like a huge, like, coveted legend in the world of wrestling collectors. So I have a Dude Love Bone Cruncher now, which is, it's in a pretty good condition. It's in a box, and it's almost a shame, because like I would never actually hear the crunch because there's no way I'm ever unboxing that figure. But another like funny-ish story that I kind of have. So Mattel did a series at one point, like the Wrestling Legends, not the one that they're doing now with like the brown little thing at the top of the box, but they did 3 battle packs, I think, and I have 2 of them. So there's one of Nikolai Volkov and Iron Sheik, and the other one of Cowboy Bob Orton and Roddy Piper. And those were, like, first of all, the figures are super detailed. They're super cool. But the boxes were also super cool. Like, they were this huge for 2 figures. And I actually bought them when I was just starting to collect figures. And I was on the road. I was traveling. So at first, I was intending to keep them in the box, of course. But then I was packing my suitcase, nothing was fitting, and I begrudgingly unboxed them. Fast forward maybe like 5 years, when I'm already a collector and like I know what's going on. I was scrolling through wrestling figures on Amazon in the middle of the night, as one does, and I find
tell us
one of those
about your social media.
and
where can we find you?
in the box. It's worth like $400 now, and I just completely ruined that for myself because I didn't know better. So you can find me on YouTube. My YouTube channel is youtube.com/Xenia did that, Xenia. And I have the same nickname on Instagram, Twitter. My Instagram is more so lifestyle. You can see my fashion looks there, my travels. My Twitter is more wrestling geared. I live tweet shows. I post updates. I also have a Patreon. You can also look it up, patreon.com/Xenia did that. I post exclusive pictures, I post updates, I post my YouTube videos on there earlier than they actually release on the channel. I also post some like backstage outtakes, and this is probably going to be on there, like some videos of me just doing this. I also have a merch website. I have a pro wrestling tees if you're into that. If you're in this woods, you can find me in pro wrestling tees. Also, Xenia did that. But I also have a Teespring. Also Xenia did that. You can look it up, or it's on my link tree that you can find on all my social media. I have some pretty cool merch that doesn't look like wrestling merch. I wanted to make it look more so like cool street style clothes type of thing. So check it out. I've had a bit of a break from YouTube because I was moving, but that's all done. I'm completely in a separate place now, and I'm gonna start posting videos again.
I'm definitely gonna have to check those out. I can't wait for them to drop.
I have Jessica Alabama.
Well, I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to chat with me. It's been a lot of fun.
So it's gonna be,
and I can't wait to do it again.
I'm back in town. Check me out.
Thank you, and I hope you have a good rest of the day, and I hope you feel better. All right, take care.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.